What's up, guys? Bran once again from Bloody Breakdown, and today we're going to be doing another ranked video. So the trailers have been released. I've covered them, at least the latest two here on this channel, and the hype is real. Of course, I'm talking about Halloween, which is going to be the 11th installment overall in the franchise, but today we're going to be ranking what we know already, the first 10 installments of the franchise. Maybe I'll do another one of these down the road, or maybe throw a mention where I'd put the newest film from Blumhouse coming out on October 19th in this ranking. But for now, knowing what we know, the 10 films we have, here is my ranking of the Halloween franchise. So, we're going to start out with number 10, obviously. Nice round number Halloween has given us. Number 10. My least favorite, and in my opinion the least effective film in the franchise. I'm sure it's not going to shock too many people that it is 2002's Halloween Resurrection. Now, this film, in my estimation, bear in mind, I hate no Halloween film. It's my favorite franchise because the original '78 John Carpenter classic is my favorite film ever made. And anything cut from that cloth, I'm going to enjoy at least a tad. And this movie is proof of that. Because if this movie was about any, if it wasn't Halloween, I don't think I would ever watch this movie more than once. With that said, this movie is pointless to me. I see absolutely no reason why it has to exist. The Busta Rhymes stuff is, we've all talked about it and heard about it ad nauseum at this point. Busta Rhymes doesn't need to be kung fu kicking Michael Myers' ass. Let's just be 100% honest about that right off top. I don't like any character in this film. Any of them, with the exception of Michael, and, that's barely. So I wasn't a big fan of the guy who played Michael here, although his stunt work seems legit. I guess I can say that nice about him. But I'm just not a fan of this film at all. I don't care how many different endings you try. None of them work well for me. It's unfortunate that this is the last note we go out on for the original series up until the new film coming out. So we're going to go ahead and move on. The less said about that one, the better. I don't get it. You kill Laurie in the first few minutes. You think it's maybe going to return him to what he was in the original, and it couldn't have been further from that. So, we'll move on. I'll stop shitting on Halloween Resurrection, and we'll go to number 9, Rob Zombie's Halloween 2. Now, I think that there's a large contingent out there who like this movie somehow, and another large contingent of Halloween fans that absolutely hate this movie. I'll say something nice about it first, because one of the main things that, really the only thing I can defend this movie with is the death of Annie in this film, of course portrayed by Danielle Harris. Her death is pretty brutal, but the reaction that Scout Taylor Compton, I believe her name is, who plays Laurie, the performance she gives when she finds her, and that's gripping. I don't remember another death in the franchise where there's so much emotion involved in their death, and that really stood out to me. Other than that, Michael doesn't wear his mask much. He speaks. Big fucking no-no. And there's a white horse in hallucinations of his mother. Don't know where the fuck that came from. Not a fan. So we'll move on to number 8, which is 1989's Halloween 5, The Revenge of Michael Myers. Now, a lot of people defend this movie. I'll say this, we all know it was rushed. Halloween 4 was a huge success, one of the biggest success stories of the franchise. It was rushed. The script wasn't where it needed to be. The people who hate Halloween 6 so much because of the Thorn cult and everything that went into that, those problems started here, which is why this movie, for me, is actually lower than that film. The character of Tina is probably the most annoying character in the history of the franchise. Definitely someone who I would say is a contender for one of the most annoying characters in the history of horror. The goofy cops with the weird Power Rangers Bulk and Skull music is just awful. But Danielle Harris does a good job in this one. There's a couple of good scenes, like the laundry chute scene. I appreciate that. Dr. Loomis, Donald Pleasance being back in it. He's completely batshit crazy in this one, so that's pretty good. So a couple of good things to say, but overall, a lot of issues with this one. So, up next, at number 7, I believe. Yeah, number 7 is Halloween, The Curse of Michael Myers. Now, I'm putting the producer's cut and the theatrical release both into my decision to put this at number 7. I, as a kid, really like that movie. And I believe it's more nostalgia because it came out in '95, and this was around the time in which I was really starting to get into horror. And I believe this was the first sequel I ever saw to a Halloween film. So maybe it's nostalgia that I have feelings where I have mixed emotions about this film. I understand where people are coming from when they say that that movie is garbage. I get it. And a lot of it was, you know, the director. A lot of it was the writing and it being the first film where they had test screenings and Miramax on top, and it was a transition period. Do I prefer producer's cut or theatrical? It's really just a toss of the coin, honestly, depending on what you're in the mood for that day. I'm not big on Michael Myers fathering a child with his niece, which is the implication at some points in the film. It's a very odd movie, but there are certain things about this movie that I really like, and that I'll watch this movie anytime. I know it's not a fantastic film, I know that, but maybe if for nothing but nostalgia's sake, it has a bit of a special place in my heart. So it's going to be coming in there at number 7. So number 6 here on the list is 2007's Rob Zombie's Halloween. Now, the reason this comes in at the top of the low half of the list, so to speak, is because the first half of the film is something that I looked at and I go, oh wow, interesting. We're kind of getting a prequel and a remake. Let's see what you got, Rob. I really enjoyed House of a Thousand Corpses and The Devil's Rejects. I feel was his tour de force, and it came out like, what, 2 years before this film? So I was really excited hearing the premise, hearing we get a quasi-prequel with this remake, and then the first half is, not a fan. I don't have a big problem with Rob Zombie's love of white trash in his films. It's not really that. It's just maybe I felt like it gave a little too much backstory and exposition behind Michael Myers, which is the same problem really the only problem that I have as far as a big issue with Halloween Curse of Michael Myers. So I feel like the second half is done really well. I think that, Scout playing Laurie and the actor who played Loomis did a fairly good job. I'm a huge fan of Brad Dourif, so seeing him in that gets it extra points as well. But at the end of the day, it's honestly for me a so-so film. And to be honest with you, I'm glad that Rob Zombie got a crack to make the Halloween remake. But honestly, maybe years down the road, I know everyone hates remakes, but maybe I wouldn't mind someone else getting a shot at it. Rob is a little too, pigeonholed when it comes to his filmmaking, and I'd like to see someone else get a shot. But we're talking years down the road. So, it's coming in, and we're in the top 5 now. So coming in at number 5, ladies and gentlemen, is the Meyerless sequel. We're talking Halloween 3, Season of the Witch. Now, a lot of people, fans of the franchise, absolutely despise the movie, and I think that obviously comes from a place of there's no Michael Myers, there's no Dr. Loomis, there's no Laurie Strode, there's nothing or no one that you've come to know and love at this point in the franchise before or since. However, just looking at is this a good movie or not? Yes, it is. It's a fantastic horror film. It is a gem, in my opinion, from 80s horror. If it wasn't called Halloween 3, I don't think anyone would have an issue with it at all whatsoever. I know a lot of people are just now coming to the point to where it's like, look, hey, we don't have to defend this movie anymore. It speaks for itself. It's a good movie, and the people who don't like it just because of what it is or what it lacks from the other movies in the franchise, let them deal with that on their own. It was a cool little experiment to see if they could turn the franchise into like a Twilight Zone anthology type series of movies, and the fans wanted Myers. So it is what it is, guys, and I honestly appreciate the film. I like it. Shout out to Tommy Lee Wallace for a very interesting entry in the franchise. So coming in at number 4 is 1998's, and I may get some hate for this, Halloween H2O. Now, a lot of Halloween franchise fans and Halloween fans in general do not like this movie. I get it. I get it. The guy, Chris Durand, I believe his name is, who played Michael Myers, you could tell the guy had never watched a Halloween movie. The sit-up was god-awful. A lot of his portrayal I wasn't a fan of. The mask or masks, including that weird CGI mask. Yeah, sure, I wasn't a fan of that stuff. I wasn't really a fan of seeing Michael's eyes in the first place, which I believe this is the first film you actually see that on a constant basis. And they were not the blackest eyes. They were not the devil's eyes. They were Chris Durand's blue eyes. But I am a huge fan of Scream and the movies that are mirrored after that. And it kind of is a full circle thing. Because if you think about it, Halloween influenced Scream. Scream, and H2O is influenced by Scream. Let's be real. It's kind of a full circle thing here if you look at it. I believe they're actually watching Scream 2 in this movie, and they're watching the original Halloween in Scream. So it's really, to me it's cool. I appreciate it for what it is, a 20-year anniversary where they tried to pull out all the stops and have a really, if nothing else, fun film. So yeah, certain aspects I'm definitely not a fan of for this movie, but overall I have a nostalgia boner for 90s horror, and that's why it's coming in at number 4. So we'll move on, guys. Number 3 is 1981's Halloween 2. Now this one I struggled with to pick a number 2. Or to pick a 3 and a 2. To be quite frank with you, what we have left in the series, I mean, I'm sure we all know what number 1 is, but as far as the other 2 that have yet to be announced on this list, they're fantastic sequels. Probably the best sequels. Definitely so, in my opinion. But I think the reason this comes in at number 3 is because, well, you know what, I don't really want to, there's nothing really negative to say about it. It's honestly just a preference when making this list, and especially coming down to the nitty-gritty here. I really like this movie. It's a big dip, it's a little jarring when you watch Halloween and then you watch Halloween 2, because it's supposed to be the same night, but a lot has changed in the film industry, especially in the horror subgenre, since 78 to 81. So Michael, it's a lot more violent. Even though they're using the same mask, it still looks different. You got a different guy portraying Michael Myers and Dick Warlock. While I do appreciate his performance, I tend to agree with most people who say he walked a little too slow. That was a director's call. Rick Rosenthal, who gave us the shittiest Halloween also. So it's kind of hard to put my finger on what is the intangible thing here that makes it number 3 and not number 2. But those are just a few things that go through my mind when I think of this list. So obviously, if you're keeping count here, that brings us to number 2, and that brings us to my personal favorite sequel in the entire franchise so far, Halloween 4: The Return of Michael Myers. Now, if we're talking problems with the film, the mask. The mask is an issue. And not just the pink one with blonde hair in that one scene, but the mask in general is an issue in this movie. Michael's definitely more strong and like zombie Jason was in part 6 almost. But if you want to talk about a movie that goes back to the original, that you know, has been said 1,000 times. It goes back to basics, as Mustafa Akkad said. This is definitely it. I think this movie is so far probably the closest to the original that we have seen since the original. And, you know, Ellie Cornell and Danielle Harris do a fantastic job. Donald Pleasance, as always, does a fantastic job. Which, by the way, earlier, speaking of Donald Pleasance, I meant to say another reason I like or hold a nostalgic place for 6, Curse, is because it was Donald Pleasance's last film. But anyway, coming back to 4 here, before I get way off the tracks, I feel like it was definitely the best sequel. Were there issues? Yeah, sure. But, you know, for me, for my dollar, this is, you know, if we're going to show anyone a sequel who's just seen the original classic Halloween and you want to show them the best follow-up that's been made to date, I'll be showing them Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers. So, yeah, big fan of that one. So, I'm sure most people realize by this point what number 1 is. And that is my favorite horror film of all time, my favorite film of all time. John Carpenter's 1978 horror classic, Halloween. This is the original, of course. I cannot say anything bad about this film. It's not in me. This is the film that made me a horror fan. This is the film that made me realize that a lot of other films out there had copied the blueprint. And some made it their own, some didn't. When it comes to slasher films, obviously. And that movie became the gateway to not just being a Halloween fan, but being a horror fan. The movie is damn near flawless. Damn near perfect. You're going to struggle to find another slasher film, in not just my opinion, but most people's opinion, that know anything about horror films. You're going to struggle to find anyone that's going to come up with something that's better than this. It's a classic. It's been, you know, put up in the national, what is it, you know, film registry for important films. It was uber successful. We all know, you know, it made bukus of money off, what, $325,000. Dr. Loomis, aka Donald Pleasance, fantastic performance in this film. That speech he gives is just so impactful. Jamie Lee's first film, and what a performance by her. I don't think there's really a bad performance by anybody in this film. The writing is amazing. The directing is amazing. The cinematography is amazing. Big shout out to John Carpenter and Dean Cundy and, you know, Deborah Hill. It's a fantastic film. You know, even if you're not a fan, you know, and so light on gore, so light on blood, so heavy on suspense and tension. And, you know, I can't say enough good about it. Can't think of a single bad thing to say about it. It's a fantastic film, and that's why it's number 1. And it's not just number 1 in this franchise, in my opinion. It's number 1 of all time. So, guys, with that said, before I depart from you all, I'd like to know what you think about not only my list here, my ranking, but I want to know your ranking. How would you rank the Halloween franchise? So do so down below in the comments below. I'll be sure to engage with you all, as I do enjoy doing. Also, if you enjoyed the video, leave me a thumbs up. If you haven't already, subscribe and ring that notification bell. And also check down below in the description section where you'll see links to follow and friend me on all kinds of different social media, and even support this channel financially on Patreon if that's something you'd like to do. So, one more time, guys, I'm Brandon from Bloody Breakdown, and we'll catch you next time.